The Docklands Light Railway has lots of evocative station names. East India, Canary Wharf, Cyprus, you'd hardly know you were still in East London. And then there's Mudchute. I honestly can't think of a worse named station, apart from St Sewage in the east. The area around Mudchute Station is surprisingly pleasant given the name. It was admittedly pretty muddy when I filmed there, but then it was December. Stations are usually named to make them sound more attractive than they actually are. For instance, I've already talked about how North End Station was renamed West Kensington to make it sound posher. The station that preceded Island Gardens was named North Greenwich, even though it was on the other side of the river from Greenwich. So why, of all the things they could have called this station, did they choose a name that makes it sound like a euphemism for a sewage outlet? There isn't even really a place called Mudchute. Well, the obvious conclusion one would draw would be that the alternative was something even worse. And in the 1980s, it was. The station was originally to be named Millwall Park, which made sense. The station is indeed next to Millwall Park. Well, so is Island Gardens, but let's not split hairs. The point is that the station is in Millwall, by Millwall Park. Millwall Park was a geographically indicative name. Now, if you live in Britain, but outside of East London, Millwall has certain associations. Millwall FC is a football team that started out as the works team for J.T. Morton's cannery in, yes, Millwall, in 1885. By 1910 they had grown to the point where they had to move away from Millwall to Bermondsey, where they remain to this day. As I know nothing about football, I have no opinions on the team itself. But the team itself wasn't the problem. The problem was the supporters. Millwall had a reputation for having the rowdiest fans of all. Now, football hooliganism is not a 20th century phenomenon. King Edward II was concerned about the problem as far back as the 14th century. But it became particularly prominent in the 1960s. Football hooliganism isn't just rowdy fans getting out of control. It's more about people who use the sport as an excuse for violence. Supporters formed firms, gangs of hooligans who would clash with firms from rival teams. Fights would erupt in stadiums and on the streets whenever a match was played. The matches themselves were disrupted by pitch invasions. With black players becoming more prominent in the 1970s, hooligans were easy meat for the National Front and other racist organisations looking for recruits. English supporters gained an international reputation normally reserved for plague rats. It was all rather miserable for the majority of fans who were just there to enjoy the game. In 1985, the world would be shocked by the Heysel Stadium disaster when a gang of Liverpool fans invaded their stands of their rivals Juventus. In the fight, a wall came down, killing 39. British clubs were banned from international tournaments for 5 years. Not that anyone needed a wake-up call, but it was a wake-up call. Violence was threatening the game itself. A number of measures were introduced in the 80s, but the government were generally pretty clueless about the whole thing. In 1989, the Football Spectators Act gave the police greater powers to crack down on troublemakers, banning known hooligans from stadiums and even from travelling to matches. While the problem never completely went away, by the 90s things were far more under control. Millwall's supporters were the most notorious of all. Their stadium, The Den, was closed 5 times following incidents of hooliganism. In 1982, Alan Thorne, the club chairman, threatened to wrap Millwall FC up altogether if the rowdy minority of fans couldn't behave. In 1985, at an away game against Luton, Millwall fans rioted, resulting in 31 arrests. To this day, Millwall has a bad reputation, although it should be pointed out that in recent years the club has done a lot to combat this. For instance, they've become involved in projects like Save Lewisham Hospital and kick racism out of football. But in the mid-80s, Millwall did not inspire good feelings in your average Brit. As I've said before, there was a propaganda element to the DLR. It was intended to attract investment to the area. The feeling was that Millwall Park evoked images of broken bottles in the face rather than an up-and-coming area, which was ironic because by that time Millwall FC hadn't been based there for 70 years. So why Mudchute? Well, the name Mudchute is quite literal. It dates back to the 1870s. Millwall Dock opened in 1868 and it suffered from a little problem with mud. It would very quickly silt up and require dredging. The dock's engineer, Frederick Duckham, came up with the mudchute as a solution to where this mud should go. He built up banks of ash and clinker in a rectangular shape. Mud would be pumped in through an underground pipe into the hollow in the middle. It must have smelt pretty revolting. In 1909, the dock was taken over by the Port of London Authority, as was the mudchute. In the 1970s, when the docks were running down, the PLA handed it over to the Greater London Council, which probably isn't the nicest present anyone's ever received. There were plans to build housing there, but following a campaign by the Association of Island Communities, it was turned into a park and nature reserve with a city farm, from which the station took its name. It also has an anti-aircraft gun, presumably in case of wayward Millwall fans. Mudchute has the rare distinction of having an abandoned DLR station. The station was originally here at the end of the old Millwall Extension Railway viaduct and opened in 1987. At the time, Island Gardens, the next station along, was the southern terminus. But the railway proved successful enough that an extension was authorised to Lewisham. The track had to be realigned for the tunnel under the Thames, and so in 1999 Mudchute and Island Gardens were moved and the old stations demolished. Sadly, nothing remains of the old Mudchute, which was built on a concrete viaduct. So that's the tale of Mudchute, a station that might have gone by a different title altogether were it not for the fact that Millwall's name at the time was, Mud. Hello all, I hope you enjoyed this rowdy video. If you did, then please click the like button, maybe subscribe and click the bell icon for more. And I'll see you again very soon. Cheerio.